Good morning, everybody, and welcome to State of the Nation 16, Retail Doctor Group's webinar on building efficient retail. As always, our webinars will be recorded, so if you do need to leave early, you can access it on Retail Doctor Group's YouTube channel later today, or also recorded on our podcast channel that will be live later in the day. This morning, we'd like to welcome two fantastic speakers, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we're looking at in the future of retail and the future of consumers. So without further ado, and also any questions that the audience have, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we will ask our speakers as we go through. So passing to Brian Walker, CEO of Retail Doctor Group, to introduce our speakers for today.
Thanks, Anastasia. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. And, you know, the whole State of the Nation events for us are an important part of our calendar because we bring industry leaders to the forum, we discuss really contemporary topics, and today is no exception to that. So I'm delighted to invite Tom Leake, who's General Manager of Rebel Sport, and Rebel is a terrific business, as is the business of Munro Footwear, and we're delighted to have Marcus Bartlett with us, Chief Operating Officer, CFO for the Munro Footwear Group. So good morning, gentlemen. Great to have you both with us. All right, well, we might start at the start, Anastasia, and talk about under the sort of the banner of efficient retail. Just want to talk about some of the really key areas of efficiency, differentiation, and where market leading position will be really focused on. And certainly as we come out of the COVID period, and already we're seeing good, strong sales in New South Wales and the physical store network. I'm sure Tom will speak to that for his business and Marcus as well. But certainly we see some key areas. Supply channel as a really key call out for speed, efficiency, differentiation. And of course, in the previous thinking of retail, it was very linear, if you like. But now we talk about end-to-end customer experience. So the ability to focus in on speed and efficiency within a supply channel, increasing use of digitalization in the supply channel, use of AI will become more prominent this coming year and the year after. And also localized supply, I think, will become more prevalent given the COVID experiences of relying on international supply channel product supply. No secret here, channel integration. Whilst a lot of people have always, ourselves included, have referred to this idea of omni-channel, we increasingly talk about the retail ecosystem into that fluid retail. And I think what you'll start to see very quickly, and certainly in the years ahead, is we will focus a lot more on this concept of brand, and how customers do business with you will become very secondary in terms of offline, online, you know, the sort of the multi-channel or cross-channel, multi-channel, omni-channel. This channel thinking will start to dissipate. And one of the key opportunities for retailers will be to think about how that plays out within their organization. The silo structured approach will become secondary to this customer channel integration piece. The idea that I can go online, return in stores, my inventory is seamless, it's frictionless retail, the growth of 5G, all these elements will drive the rise of brand and if you like, branded offer to channel to customer. And that takes us into, of course, the back-end systems, the rise of the platform. And no greater localized case study in Australia than what Woolworths supermarkets are doing with the rise of their platform and thinking about range, product, endless aisle, the ability to be a true platform provider. And that's becoming a really big focus of capital expenditure for retailers. Well, for those of us who have worked with us before and listened to us talk about this topic, we see a very clear divide between shopping and buying. And shopping is the showroom, experiential experience. It's the new Rebel fit outs. It's all about touch and feel, social instinct, getting people into shops. And if you have been forced to have a break, if you like, from shops, as many of us have, consider the theatre of your offer. Consider the experience of your retail format. For those retailers intending on looking the same way they did 2 years ago, particularly for their pilot stores, we'd urge you to build more theatre in. And buying, of course, is the commoditized value range price driven offer that online provides around convenience. But there is a clear and emerging dichotomy, almost paradoxic in a sense when I talk about the brand, but a dichotomy about what we want our customers and how we want them to do business with us. But we certainly want to dial up the experience and build even better shopping experiences. For students of artificial intelligence and understanding where that's going, that is really only at base camp if it's there at all. And digitalization, both in supply channel, front-end customer experience, loyalty programs, database management, segmentation. And we are moving certainly from, if you like, random use of customer data to personalized use of customer data into predictive use of customer data. And AI is driving that bandwagon. So I do urge you to get closer and closer to understanding the power of AI and how it will drive a lot more change. And the final retail trend that we're seeing, well, obviously we've been very strong advocates of this through our limbic personality profiling and so forth. This idea that all customers are created equal, that it's vanilla, that it's about the herd is passé. And retailers and the savvy retailers are really understanding the psychology of their customers, even from the early work of Lindstrom all the way through, understanding human behavior, human motivation, and then linking that to the science of AI provides you with an extremely powerful platform in which to get deeper in and predict consumer behavior. So we see that as a very key trend for 2022 and beyond. So, and all these elements are elements of building efficient retail. And so, you know, it's a more complex business, and do think about the organization of the future. What sort of skill sets retailers will need in order to win in all these respective areas.
And then I think building on what Brian's saying, we're moving into who is that customer. And I just want to talk a little bit about what trends have we seen in customer behavior this year and what do we kind of predict will happen going forwards, because understanding the consumer is such a deep part of building an efficient retail network. If you don't have that customer connection, you can have all the bells and whistles, but they're not going to come through the door. So I think taking a step back and looking at who is that future customer. So they make plans to virtually try on outfits, so you don't have to visit the store. Well, we've experienced that now in COVID. Whip together a party in minutes and have it sent to your home by drone. So again, we're seeing that now with 1 hour delivery, 30-minute delivery. Find the birthday gift, and in a few clicks, it's on your doorstep. So when I first presented this slide, this was pre-COVID. A lot of this people forgot it's never going to happen, and now we go, yeah, tick, tick, tick. And so we can see how the consumer journey really is moving. And I think it's super important to now understand, well, how does our customer want to interact with us? What do they want to do in our stores, and what do they want to do online? Because it's a very different behavior. Again, touching on what Brian was saying between buying and shopping. So understanding that customer and how they want to interact, how they want to shop with you is really even more important now. So a couple of the consumer trends that we've seen throughout 2021 and the ones that we see moving into 2022. So first, time is a currency. Consumers have spent so much time at home and with their families. Time is very valuable to them now. So it's really understanding as a retailer, where can we save them time? What can we do to increase the convenience and reduce that friction? Because now in a lot of the research that we do in our insights division, we're seeing that customers want it to be easy, they want it to be quick, they want it to be simple. They don't want to read a menu, they don't want to walk through a whole store to find what they want. They don't want to turn up to find the product they want out of stock. So it's really, how do we improve that convenience factor? And then on the other end of the scale, it's retail as an activity. So again, this is building on what Brian's saying. And we've been talking about experiential retail for a few years, but I think we're moving into a territory that's slightly different now, and that's retail as an activity. Customers want to leave the house and they see retail as an activity and a way to spend their time. They want something to do with their time, and they want a retailer that's going to excite them, enjoyment, make it a fun experience when they're in the store, a store that they can visit purely for the enjoyment of visiting. So I think we're going to see a lot of consumers move to that level. I think the midnight queuing at Kmart on Monday only really proved that customers were so desperate for the experience. You're not telling me anyone was desperate to purchase something from Kmart at 12:01. It wasn't the product, it was the experience and the enjoyment of the shopping activity. The next trend that we're seeing is loyalty. So in the last 12 months, we've seen a massive increase in customers' loyalty to retailers and using loyalty schemes. And the classic collecting points is not necessarily the loyalty scheme that they're looking for now. So again, it's not one size fits all. It's very different depending on who that customer is. Are they looking for specific events in store? Are they looking to build a connection with their retailer through the online channels? Or are they looking for something else, one-of-a-kind experiences, in-store advice, special events? So I think really looking as to revisiting the loyalty scheme that retailers have now and seeing how can we take it that one step further to align with our customers. And then pre-research. So 80% of our customers are interacting with us through digital channels before they go into the physical store. So it's super important now as a retailer to understand that customer journey prior to the point of sale. So really understanding at what point do they touch with us, at what point do they discuss with us, and what do they look at prior to visiting the stores. And then digital. So digital, very much an experience now and how we bring the digital into the physical store. I think this is one of the key areas that's again been growing and growing over the years, but customers now in the last 12 months have been forced to become digital savvy. We're seeing customers over the age of 65 now regular online grocery shoppers, which if you'd asked me 18 months ago, we'd have said, never going to happen, don't even try. So now we know that we've got that in store. Everybody knows how to use a QR code. Everybody's got that technology available now. So I think understanding how we can blend that into the physical store to really create an exceptional customer experience. I'd seen a great stat that was saying that the use of augmented reality for customers that interact with augmented reality prior to purchase is a 90% higher conversion rate. So it's really how do we build that into our offer? Now the rise of social media. Now for anyone that's got teenage children, they're probably not surprised by this. But when it talks about retail, it's something that a lot of retailers said, well, it's great, but it doesn't get me sales. Well, the most recent research that we've done shows that 30% of consumers said social media had a direct impact on their purchase from a retailer. So we can really see that it's not just a nice to have anymore. It's really a vital part of that whole customer journey. So understanding what are the right social media channels. So for one thing's for certain, I definitely say don't try to be all things to all people. You do not need to be on TikTok if your audience is not on TikTok. So understand where is your audience, where do they spend their time, and how do they want to interact to determine this social media. But it's no longer a channel that retailers can say, well, it's great, but I don't need it. We've really seen stats in the last 12 months specifically that's showing that it's really driving sales.
I had an experience on the weekend where I was with my teenage daughter, heavy social media user, passed by a single shop front boutique. And I said, oh, that looks nice. And I said, yeah. And she said, it's got 10,000 Instagram followers. There was the reference point,
Yeah.
you know, which I thought was really interesting. And just the language and the thinking around how you look at a business. Mm-hmm. So there was a case in point.
And that 30% is the Australian population as a whole. If we looked at the Gen Z population, I imagine it would be somewhere a lot higher, 70, 80% that have got that influence. Another area that we're looking at seeing is kind of making, I want to say a comeback. It's never really gone away, but it got a bit quieter during COVID, is brand ethics. So we're talking about the whole package. So ethics, sustainability, caring for the environment. What does the brand stand for? And I think customers now are looking a lot more for what does the brand stand for? It's not as simple as sustainable or no plastic anymore. It's who are we as a brand and what does that mean? And as a customer, do I connect with that? They want a brand that they connect with, and that's how they will share part with their money. So I think it's really important to take a step back and not just try and do all things in sustainability. Understand, what does your brand mean? What are your brand values and who are you? And therefore, what does that mean to the customer? And the final trend is local. Now, again, this will not surprise anybody. We've seen this come up increasingly in the last 18 months in all of the research we're doing. And every time it's building further and further. Customers looking, it's not just support my local retailer, it's looking for Australian made products, locally made products, Australian brands, local brands, all in this basket. And it seems to be very much a movement as I want to support Australia, I want to support the rebuild of the country. So I think it's a trend that we're going to see probably for the next 12 months while we shift to the new normal. But this is really important for Australian retailers to be showing that they're Australian. It's quite often taken as a given, I feel, for a lot of retailers, and the customers actually are not very aware. So you might think, oh, we've been in Australia for 50 years, we're Australian through and through. But listen to the customers. Do they know that, or are they thinking, oh, I'm going to go to the local because they definitely are Australian? So I think there's just a little missing link sometimes there. So the other things that we've seen in our research over the last 12 months, and the areas that we've either seen growing quite quickly, so social media, local and Australian loyalty, these are the ones that have come up during the COVID lockdowns and really changed the way customers behave. And the other ones are the trends that we've seen growing for a few years now that are showing no signs of disappearing. One thing I just quickly, before we pass on to our panel session, want to touch on is we've talked about the trends, but we can't just use a broad brush across all customers. Our customers are very different. We've got to start thinking about who are those people. And one of a great comment here is executives who continue to attempt and navigate using demographic maps with borders defined by age, gender, location, income will be ill prepared for the speed and scale and direction of change. And I think a great example is here. So we talk about millennials, and when the term millennials first came about, 7 or 8 years ago, everyone just grouped millennials in a basket. But if you think about it, a millennial is a rather large group, so anything from a 24-year-old to a 38-year-old. So if we're targeting millennials with one brush, we're very much getting a broad range of consumers who are in very different lifestyles, with very different personalities, with very different drivers. So it's really important to dig down into who these personalities are. So who are your customers, not just their ages, demographics, locations, but building on top of that to their personalities. So we know within our Insights division that we've got 7 different personality types. We've got those that are very much into the game, the excitement, the fun, and then we've got very much those that are into safety, security, reliability, and then everything in between. So I think as a business now moving forward, it's really important to dig further into those customers to really understand the nuances of who are we talking to and what do they want. So enough talking from me. Thank you all.
That's great. Thanks, Anastasia. 2 quick points. Millennials are the largest buying power now. They basically globally have the share of the wallet. So they are the largest. And that started in 2020. We didn't talk about product development or even innovation in product as a differentiator because it's actually more of a hygiene factor. It's expected of leading retailers that they're continually refreshing product, innovating with product ranges. And, you know, if I pass now to our guests today, that'll be very much part of their core discipline of bringing new product into market. So we took a very consumer-centric view of those trends, but yeah, as we say. So what I'll do now, if I may, is introduce our 2 speakers. And so first of all, welcome to Tom Leake. And Tom, great to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about the Rebel business under your stewardship.
Thanks, Brian, and good morning, everyone. Wonderful to be with you. Thanks for taking a bit of time out of your day to check in on all things efficiency in retail. For those that know a bit about Rebel, Rebel's part of the SRG stable, so 4 brands sitting under the Super Retail Group organisation in Macpac, Super Cheap Auto, BCF or Boating, Camping, Fishing, and Rebel. We've been around since 1985, currently have 155 doors around the nation, Last year, FY20's turnover at 1.2 billion. It was interesting hearing you talk about members and how we talk about, and now we've got 3.2 million active members. And we're nearing on 6,000 team members out across the network as well. So yeah, it's a great business. I think we've had some really interesting times over the last 12, 18 months, and looking forward to unpacking some of that with you today.
Thanks, Tom. Welcome again. Marcus, great to have you with us. Marcus Bartlett, Munro Footwear Group. Marcus, a little bit about your business, if you'd be kind enough.
Morning, Brian, and hi to everyone. Thanks for the time again today. So Monroe Footwear Group, we're a multi-branded footwear retailer and wholesaler. So we operate five different brands across the country. We've got around 260 stores at the moment. We operate 11 different websites, including Australia's largest pure play online footwear retailer, Instalment. So we've got over 1,500 team members across the country, and yeah, looking forward to discussing our business for today.
Brilliant. Well, let's start on the topic of efficient retail, if we may, gentlemen. You know, if we think back not that long ago, the idea of efficiency was quite linear, wasn't it? We'd order our product, we'd have it delivered, we'd sell it in shops, we'd look for efficiency in that process, and that would be retail. But now, today, efficiency really touches on much of what we've talked about already. But Tom, what is efficient retail to you as a leader when you think about the topic?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. It's a great question. It's you know, reflecting on this and thinking about it, there's probably two different angles that I look at when I think about efficiency in retail. And I think the first and foremost, it comes back to group and how the organisation sets itself up in terms of efficiency in retail. So what I mean by that is, you know, genuine collaboration across all functions. So if I look at Marcus from the finance and the input point of view, really critical inputs to that in terms of making sure we set ourselves up, but equally across all things marketing, merchandise, retail, planning, e-commerce, all of that has to be just seamlessly connected in order to get that real efficiency of output. And then I think secondly, Brian and Pete team, you know, how that plays out at store level is probably around inputs versus outputs. So I guess all those input being people, how you set your people up, time that you spend, the money or the investment in the organisation, and how that plays out relative to the outputs. So the outputs being obviously your sales and then your customer experience, whether that be through the online channel, through that explore versus transact piece, and then also, as Anastasia's touched on, and a few of her points around the experiential piece in retail as well. So, you know, once again, another output. I can't go past Anastasia, the comment there around schlepping with shopping bags going through malls as well too. So I think there's a bit of yes, obviously an accelerated growth online, but I still think there's an opportunity to schlep your bags through the mall as well. Might be on that yet. But yeah, that's probably my view there, Brian. I think there's probably a real cohesiveness at the front end, leading to a really efficient output at the back end.
I sometimes think that we inherently live in a world of disequilibrium, and the idea of efficiency is to bring as much equilibrium to all those points that you make reference to. But yes, absolutely. And Marcus, how do you see this concept of efficiency in retail?
I think to add to Tom's comments, for me, really looking from the customer perspective is critical as well. That seamless experience that you spoke to earlier, Brian, in terms of being able to navigate the customer across different channels within our business and provide them with, irrespective of how they choose to shop our business, provide them with the best journey possible. I think that's critical in terms of having that efficient retail model. Tom's point around business alignment and having that business model in place is really key. I think that helps position internally to be able to support that customer journey in the best way possible. And I think in addition to that, having a really robust strategy with respect to data capture and data management, I think is really key. I think that helps unlock some of the real upside, some of the cream in terms of personalization and some of those trends going forward. So for us, that's a real focus at the moment.
And Marcus, when we think about the COVID experience, what was reasonably or very efficient supply channel becomes somewhat inefficient, I guess, doesn't it? And so what does that mean as a leader when, product can't get to you and so on?
Look, you become reactive. You become, I guess, trying to make the best decisions for the business at any given point in time. Certainly, supply chain has been a aspect of our business that's been heavily disrupted, as I'm sure Tom's experienced the same. I guess all those areas that you can't control, they all of a sudden become the areas that are then challenging in terms of maintaining that business efficiency. So that's certainly been one of our biggest challenges.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And Tom, if I think about, as retailers, we're always talking about the sale, the customer sale, if you like. But I wonder if one of the measures of efficiency isn't about the returning customer, the lifelong customer, the customer value proposition. Do you think that's an indicator that a business is running efficiently when they've got a high ratio of returning customers?
Yeah, without doubt, Brian. I think that, as Stasia mentioned it before, I think if you think about herd and that hyper-personalisation, I think we've got to find different and unique and creative ways in order to engage one-to-one with the customer. I think the idea of the whole spray and pray approach, it's very much becoming a defunct notion. And I think that, yes, there's investment required in executing that. But without taking that approach, I think you're going to find yourself fairly challenged, come the future. So I think, the expectation from the customer is that we will do that the retailers will do that. And yeah, as I said, you're putting yourself really at risk if you don't start to think about things in that manner.
And efficiency changes a little bit too, doesn't it? If I think about the growing role of the physical space. So you and I would always, and we still do today, measure stores by sales per square meter and all that great stuff, average sales and all those things. But I wonder too now, if we think about retail stores becoming increasingly showrooms. So if I think of the new Rebel formats, there's less physical investment in stock, more in theatre is probably fair to say, in a lineal space. So in a theoretical concept, sales per square meter in some categories will slip a bit, but the effect of an overall branded customer experience changes, doesn't it?
Yeah, massively. And I think it's an interesting point you raised there, Brian, because if you do take the RCX, so for those playing along at home, the Rebel customer experience stores, which are a growing part of our fleet, the way that we display that front of house, as Brian said, the stock density on the front of house is significantly reduced in order to enhance that experience. However, how that translates in terms of engagement with customer, how we set up the various stores based on the demography of that, the allocation of space, they're all quite interesting metrics, but it all leads back to, as Marcus mentioned before, getting that data point from the customer, where your growth opportunities, and starting to really explore that in deeper detail than we've probably ever done before.
Great answer. And Marcus, if that question around where do you spend most of your leadership time in building an efficient business, does it change?
Look, I think in terms of where I spend my time is really one of the roles of the leaders in the business is being able to paint that longer term vision. There are a lot of individual moving parts. We don't have stores the size of Rebel, but we have the same challenge in terms of what role does the store play in our business going forward, and it's obviously heavily influenced by customer demand and customer appetite for different experiences. So, the leadership role for me and for our executives is being able to paint that longer term vision, so the team understands the journey that we're on and what we're trying to achieve through all the incremental projects and activities that we take. So it's certainly probably a lesson that we've learned during COVID in terms of talking to our teams and trying to understand how we elevate that level of engagement across the board.
Well, and what's interesting, and I should declare that many years ago I was running the Athlete's Foot, and of course the customer experience, the high level of face-to-face contact was its own form of personalisation, of course. So that must be a pretty critical ingredient for Munro, I would imagine, in the retail business.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, service, and so some of that that old stuff around efficiency never goes away. It's all not swept away into this age of digitalization entirely, is it?
No, it's not. It's still that personalized experience as you go into store, that Monroe experience that we refer to in terms of our training and development around service standards within store.
And so that efficiency gets measured in that way. Do you find customers are increasingly pretty savvy? They've had a look online. They're pretty clued up. They know what they're doing when they come into the stores. They've got a fairly good understanding.
Look, I think that's the increasing trend, as was touched on in the insights. The store's not just about shopping anymore. It's that connection between the channels is increasing, and we certainly acknowledge that in some of the strategies that we've got on.
And Tom, I'll turn to you. Thanks, Marcus. One of the, I guess the elephant in the room naturally is COVID, and just wondering how COVID's impacted your business. Well, really around leadership and still trying to maintain that efficiency in the business through the last 12 months, say.
Yeah, wow, what an interesting time it's been, I have to say. So from a leadership perspective, I think there's been a real requirement to have a level of flexibility in thinking. So, how this is playing out in Western Australia versus Melbourne versus Queensland, your audience is in really different places. I think there's a point in time that I really recall quite clearly where we were obviously dealing with things in Melbourne for quite some time, and I feel for my colleague Marcus and all of our people on the line that are down in Melbourne still having some challenges in that space. But when Sydney sort of came back onto the radar, you kind of forgot how nervous the team got, how anxious they got, because we'd been dealing with Melbourne, who kind of respectfully had kind of made friends with this was their new normal. And so when another area popped up with a level of severity, it really required us to just kind of take a breath and go, actually, this is a bit scary for these guys, and we can't forget what that's like. And equally, if you chat to our folks over in Western Australia or Queensland, where this has kind of been a very light touch, they're very empathetic towards how it's playing out around the rest of the country, but equally, they're largely cracking on, and it's a bit business as usual for a number of those folk as well. So, there's been a lot of just think about who the audience is, make sure that we're engaging with them at a level that's right for them, and how they're dealing with certain types of customer behaviour, certain types of stock challenges. It's certainly been really, really interesting and a fascinating sort of last 12, 18 months. That is for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting when we think about efficient retail, we think about process, formulaic, replicable, scalable, all those great things. But in reality, some of that just gets thrown out the window. And as Marcus rightfully says, you're forced to react because, you end the day and not knowing quite whether you'll open the next and so on. And Tom, have you found that the ability of sort of thinking around your role as a leader and being able to communicate all this change and how it's picked up, must be very interesting.
Oh, it is. And I think it's really interesting hearing Marcus talk about the strategy and the sharing of that as well, too, because I think it's really important that we don't lose sight of that as well. So, yes, this is a moment in time, and there's certain things that will continue to evolve there. But if I take another example, when you go into this lockdown, you've got this backed up supply chain, and you're dealing with some seasonality of ranges and products, and then that stock has to end up going somewhere. So it sort of certainly forces you to think about things in a much more agile sense than we would have, just allowing it normally to flow through as it normally does.
And I'll ask you both, do you see the next 12 months as we come out of COVID, do you see that balance between the heavy growth of online and physical stores? Do you see that maturing back to the shops more? And I know I've talked about the brand, but just for the question, do you have a bit of a crystal ball on that one?
Oh, you go, Marcus.
I think there'll obviously be some stabilisation of the online growth. I think that's what we're anticipating, and we'll see people return to stores and some more balance, I guess, between channels from that standpoint. I think one of the things that has been evident throughout COVID with some of the challenges that we've had from supply chain, some of those things outside of the retailer's control, is the experience for customers online hasn't necessarily been that ideal experience in terms of delays with transport carriers and the like. I think some of the potentially some of the patience with that or the tolerance of suboptimal performance from an online standpoint will dissipate as stores reopen. And so I think that's something that again we're conscious of in terms of making sure that we're really controlling that online experience and being able to deliver that consistently. But I think that's something that will help balance out the difference between channels.
Yeah. Tom, your view on that one? Thank you.
Oh, yeah, a fairly similar thing. I think we'll sort of see it start to sway back into stores. I do think what will be fascinating to see how play out is that click and collect versus delivery component through the e-commerce space. So, I think our view, and it was really interesting, even early signs in New South Wales with reopening, still very, very strong results coming through our e-commerce line. And a lot of that may be to do with the fact that, people are potentially thinking about dwell time in store exposure, particularly in the early days. So, secure my stock, secure my purchase, go grab and go, rather than actually, spend that time. So, but then equally beyond that, I think as people get a little bit more comfortable, we'll probably see things relax a little bit more. But I certainly don't think that the e-commerce volumes coming through our organisation, or most that for that matter, are likely to shift dramatically. I think we'll continue to see that evolve and continue to get bigger and better as we go on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Pre-COVID online sales, as you know, would be 360 billion, depending on who you read, for national turnover. Online sales averaged about 9% pre-COVID. They're up around 15 to 16% as an average, and obviously some way, way higher than that. For what it's worth, I actually think I tend to agree with Marcus's comment as well. I think you'll see that maturing of that online space, but the key to this will be this integrated omni-channel approach. So, the other day I watched a customer try to return an item, not to either of your two retail stores, from an online purchase, and was then told that they had to fill out 20 minutes of forms, and it was just a debacle. And I sort of observed this poor guy having the retail doctor in the corner eavesdropping. But anyway, and I thought, wow, that's a long way from seamless. And I guess that's one of the priorities for the business, is it, Tom, in terms of building in this idea of making it customer-centric and more seamless between the channels?
Yeah, look, I think as things have happened, and there's certainly been higher volumes come through that haven't been forecast or predicted, has certainly forced us to be a little bit reactionary in some instances, but making sure we react with speed and with pace. So that's been key through all of this. The returns piece, I think, it's definitely an interesting one. I think it's something that we've certainly had our challenges around, but I'd like to think that we've evolved that to a place that's certainly improved in the relatively short term. But it's certainly required that level of agility, that's for sure.
Some would say that the customer journey begins with the front of the customer experience. It's all about customer design and customer experience design and so forth. And I see that, but I actually have a view that the whole customer experience begins with the back-end architecture, the IT systems and the ability to manage inventory seamlessly, for example. Has that been a priority for your business in thinking about that customer experience?
I'm not sure where you're directing.
Tom, sorry.
Yeah, no, definitely. Analogy we often use is one of that of a restaurant, Brian. So I think if your back of house is functioning well, and when I mean back of house, I'm not just talking about the dock, I'm talking about all things that lead and create and sit behind the scenes. If that's not right in any aspect, you're going to struggle at the front end. There's no two ways about it. So I think you can't be underestimated the effort, energy, level of focus that goes into getting that right. Couldn't agree more. I think the more efficiency you've built into that back of house or back end processes, it's only going to lead to a more seamless front end experience.
And absolutely. And Marcus, if we think through that point, to be truly omni-channel, if you like, and to be truly efficient, the capital spend tends to find itself in the last year or so, probably longer, into building in these platforms, building in this systems architecture. Would you share that view? Has that been an area for Monroe in terms of thinking through greater customer experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, omnichannel is certainly a clear focus for us in terms of being able to deliver. I guess the way that we look about it is firstly looking at the individual channels, and it's not as simple as just bricks and clicks. I guess from our perspective, it's within digital there are numerous channels, as Anastasia touched on earlier, in terms of your social channels, your marketplace channels. There are numerous ways for customers to shop. So making sure you're in the correct channels is the first point, and then secondly, the experience within that individual channel, making sure that again you've designed the right experience, you've got all the back end infrastructure in place to be able to deliver a perfect experience within that channel. Once you've established that, then you're far better placed to then combine channels and provide that seamless experience, because each individual channel is healthy and performing at the level that you want. So it's very much part of our journey, and there's things that we've deployed tactically throughout COVID to be able to service web fill from stores and things like that, which are tactical solutions that we've identified are not necessarily the optimal customer experience in the long term. So we're consciously working through some of those strategies to ensure that we've embedded the right processes and the right infrastructure to deliver that long-term omni-channel experience.
And I was just thinking, Marcus, as retailers continue to be compelled, I suppose, to offer same-day delivery and half-day delivery and all the various fulfillment options and the last mile, as people refer to, they ultimately become hygiene factors for any retailer, don't they, of size and scale, that they can do this. And that as a differentiator dissipates over time.
Absolutely. That's I think that's an expectation there, as you pointed out earlier, in terms of whether it's product development, whether it's pushing into credibility around sustainability, for example. All of these factors, I think, are expected of good retailers of significant scale.
And thank you. And Tom, this issue of these differentiators, early differentiators, tend to become the norm over a period of time. And it's then what then becomes the measure of efficiency? Is it ultimately that we're doing all these things well, and we come back to the brand and the trust and product quality and some of those, almost traditional value drivers?
Yeah. Look, the hygiene factor is absolutely the right way to look at it, I think, Brian. I think there's a certain increased level of customer expectation. I think as one demonstrates that what's possible, then it sort of forces your hand in a way to make sure that you're keeping up and making sure that you're continuing to explore different options. I really loved hearing what Marcus was saying there about the omni piece as well too, because I think for me the omni piece is all about the unlock. We call it the secret sauce. It's that combination of the channels, meeting the customer on their terms, whatever that looks like in whatever space. I think that's the critical piece here. And I think you referenced it a little bit earlier, Brian, the store experience piece as well. Yes, we tend to spend a lot of time, effort and energy for the right reasons on online and that experience. But I think when you get that in-store experience as well too, right, is how that translates online, how that translates in store. And absolutely, I think it's all about getting all channels to combine and do it in the right way for each individual customer.
And yeah, absolutely. And if we sort of look at retail over the next 12 months, what are some of the sort of the keys that you see in the next 12 months as being priorities around efficiency and growth and so forth?
I think we've touched on a number of them today. I think the delivery to customer, I think, is whilst a number of those factors have been outside of control, it doesn't diminish the customer expectation that we can get it right there in that space. I think Anastasia touched on it quite early on with some of the insights as well. I think I'm totally in alignment with pretty much everything that was covered there. And when I think about AI, your back-end systems, your customer insights, that one-to-one marketing, supply chain, the speed and efficiency of getting that right. the channel integration and the ecosystem, Brian, not a new conversation, but I think that's just going to get further amplified. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many different angles, and I think agility, speed of responsiveness is really the key to all of them. So, yeah, probably they'd be my main highlights, Brian.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, you know, under this sort of efficiency, everything old is new again. I suspect that the relationship a customer has with its brand of choice, and the customer's ability to be an advocate or act in advocacy will be even more crucial than ever before, because increasingly product per se becomes ultimately commoditized, apart from new innovative products and so forth. And so it is this issue about how do we measure in brand experience? And I'm interested in your sort of thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, the innovation piece I think is key as well, because you know there's a number of consumers that's a super important piece for them, and that's really critical. A number of retailers do an excellent job of that. Equally, there's some others that are more interested in a value proposition, and that's equally for them. So I think our brands need to be true to who they are. I think it's important that you have that message, you have that strategy, you clearly communicate and articulate. I don't think you can't be everything to everyone, and I think that's important. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's really about and it's not about staying the course necessarily. I think it's more about just adapting and adopting where and when you need to, without making sure that you lose sight of actually who you are and who you want to be as a retailer.
And Marcus, would you concur with Tom's view there? You know, that really zeroing in, but segmenting customers to what they want, of course, but continuing to build that relevant brand association.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's key for us being multi-branded, understanding the positioning of our brand relative to each of our brands relative to each other, and how that plays out in the market, and that segmentation of the footwear market, and ensuring that we're delivering those experiences for the different segments through our different portfolio of brands. It's another area of focus that we're heavily investing in.
It's interesting, Marcus. I think about the topic of strategy, and obviously I've been involved in quite a few workshops and planning, as have you, good self. And strategy used to be sort of longer term. It was 5 years, then it was 3 years. Now increasingly we talk about 1 year to 18 months. What's your thinking around strategy in the horizon, particularly coming out of or going through such uncertainty?
I think that's been one of the real challenges over the past 18 months is the balancing act as a leader, in terms of having to deal with short-term issues and situations that we need to react to, and that includes some tough decisions along the way. But again, as a leader, there is that responsibility to set the business up for long-term success and sustained success. We've just recently committed to a new state-of-the-art purpose-built distribution centre, which is a 10-year commitment for the business, on the back of a lot of I'd say over the past 12 months as a board and executive, we've probably spent more time than ever talking about that long-term strategy and vision. So we still look at 2 to 3 years as being the window from a strategy standpoint, but it's always with an eye to beyond that as well, in terms of building that long-term sustainable business that's that's going to continue to deliver for customers.
And perhaps I'll ask you, without divulging, but to put your CFO hat on, and if we touch on briefly, linked to this is this idea of internal rate of return of capital, and the priorities, and saying, well, okay, this will return X over Y in 3 years, 4 years. And even that becomes a bit more problematic, doesn't it?
Look, it's difficult. I think particularly as the blurring between channels increases, and where you're generating the revenue, and what that incremental benefit for the business is harder to measure. There are so many intangible factors that go into experience that are, again, difficult to measure. So it does complicate things, but again, I think if you've got a clear vision, a clear strategy, the I know that you know the components that you need to be building in, and to get the, I guess, the right support and advice along the way, as we've done with the distribution centre. It gives you a lot of confidence that ultimately, you will deliver those, you will achieve those returns. Yeah,
no, it's a great answer. Tom, if I can, I just want to quickly talk a little bit about the organisation. Not this issue traditionally, as we've grown up with channel efficiency, we've got our online department and we've got our physical stores and so on. Does that start to get a little bit more blurred as we go forward, and that people are working cross projects and so forth?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, we're always challenging each other. You've got the e-commerce guys that are always, pushing the e-commerce, and for all the right reasons. The traditional retail guys are doing the opposite, and so I think it's a meeting of the minds there. But I think the more that we each learn about each other's spaces and how that evolves, is really quite critical. Really interesting hearing Marcus talk about that, just from a income perspective and cost base and what that looks like. Because clearly, if you just look at the store network in isolation, you've got escalating costs through rent and wages and things like that. So again, that needs to be offset somewhere. You then potentially swing to e-commerce, where you've got potentially a massive revenue driver with arguably lower cost base sitting behind that as well. So, it absolutely needs to become a seamless integration between all channels. And I think that's our great challenge is, how do you bring the online experience into store? And equally opposite, I'll give you a couple of examples of that. Like we are executing what we would call a world of strategy. So whether it's a world of football or basketball, we're really trying to make sure that that shopping experience is as connected online as it is in store, and that how that looks physically, how that presents physically, both online on the screen versus in the store. It's got to be as connected as it possibly can, and you can't be doing that in isolation. So to answer your question, Brian, there's a lot of collaboration happening in that space. A lot of working in each other's backyards, a lot of making sure that the minds are coming together to get that seamless piece of integration together. So yeah, absolutely, completely necessary.
It's a great answer as well. And if I think a little further about that, I guess as a customer, I become a member of that community. So I can access digitally via my app 24/7. There'll be some gamification probably along all this, and that the physical environment is the consummation of it all. And then post that, I'm part of the tribe. Is that kind of the thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't let that opportunity go by, Brian, without referencing the gamification piece, because Anastasia's first slide had the surfboard on the head and the gamification next to it. And I couldn't get that image of you walking down to the northern beaches going for a surf.
I got to tell you, Tom, they're longboards now. Let me just share that with you.
Well, I've definitely classified you as a gamification expert.
Totally.
Yeah, no, totally. I think you've nailed it with what you said there as well. I think it is absolutely, how does that resonate with the customer? And that's the critical piece here. That's the secret sauce.
Yeah, I think it is. And building up these tribes and communities sounds so easy to say, doesn't it? And to give them that 24/7 experience and think about it differently, so differently, that the retail experience, the physical retail experience is the showroom, it's the consummation piece. Yeah. Versus I walk in, I see a basketball on a rack, I buy it, I walk out.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. Anastasia hit it before with the social piece as well too, Brian. So again, just a couple of shares in terms of just some relatively new news for Rebel. A couple of actually Instagram specific channels for Home of Basketball. So there's a basketball specific Instagram Rebel page now. There's a page for Rebel Women. How do we connecting with her? A really, really key piece of our strategy. So so I think it's really about how do you connect, how do you build that community, and looking at all the levers that you've got available to you. So there's a couple of shares, a couple of examples there to how we're trying to execute that one.
Absolutely. I think you guys are doing it really well, and some great examples. I remember being in the States and seeing an Under Armour business with basketballs in, I think, the third level in Chicago, as I recall. But that was it. There was no relationship with the customer. It was actually giving away space in a physical store with no real experience. But I guess it was the start of that journey, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's how it plays out. Yeah, there's the fun basketball courts in a couple of our stores, which is interesting. But it's also, if you come back to online, in the last, very, very recently launched our partnership with Fanatics, which is opening up, a range of NBA, internationally. It's having that range unlock that you referenced earlier. It doesn't necessarily need to be on the floor. That's a pure online play for us, but a very, very, very important part to that community is having that product available to them, which wasn't previously available through the physical store network.
And no doubt, and I'll move to Marcus in a second, no doubt getting greater understanding of your customer in those relative segments, whichever model, is an important part of this process as well, isn't it? Because
yeah, massively so, massively. And I think it's a bit of a, I wouldn't be to say go slow to go fast. We did a lot of careful research, a lot of study, a lot of background and analysis on what our customers were looking for, and they were telling us. It was very obvious once we started to get under the hood of this thing that we needed to develop and evolve. So we've definitely doubled down our efforts in a couple of spaces. That's one. There's a few others, but basketball is definitely a category that we're seeing a lot of really strong growth out of.
Well, I'll look forward to you selling some surfboards very soon. Marcus, if you look into your categories and enhancing that customer experience, it's an interesting one in footwear, isn't it? Because it's that one area where it really is personal. And how do you build to that as a measure of efficiency?
Yeah, so look, I think I touched on earlier that the role is something that we're looking at the moment in terms of how we open up more opportunities for customers when they're in our stores. They're relatively small compared to a Rebels style footprint. So we want to provide things like the endless aisle opportunity, where we can provide a greater range. We can open up our broader offering to customers that isn't physically available to them, but to be able to provide those experiences is really key. And understanding the customer is it's really important for us as well to take the time. What
Gentlemen, what a great, I've been getting the wind up, so I'll pass back to Anastasia, but greatly appreciated. I mean, some really interesting topics. And one of my takeouts is that at some level, some of what is new was always there. And it is coming back to that core building of community, the efficiency around process, but the efficiency around getting customer advocacy and return. And ultimately, the customer's relationship with your brand and you being there when they need you is fundamental to it all. So thank you very much. Anastasia, I'll pass back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to open it up to the audience. So if you want to pop your questions into the Q&A, I'll give the audience a couple of minutes to pop them in. And while we're doing that, I just want to launch a little poll as well. So we'd really be interested to hear what our audience members think as well about what's their priorities for the next 12 months, where are they focusing, what do they think? So a couple of questions there while you're thinking about your questions for the panel as well. So I'll leave those questions on screen. Let's see what our responses are. And then we will move to audience questions. And as always, the whole recording will be available after on our Retail Group YouTube channel. And you can also listen to our podcast channel that's now available on all podcasts. I feel like a marketing person when I say that. I feel like that should be like recorded, but yeah. I always get the question as well, can we watch it later? So the answer is always yes, it's always available. Check out our YouTube channel. Okay, so there's a few questions coming in here, so I'll just leave the poll running while we there's a few questions in the poll. It's a bit of a difficult one to answer. It's not a quick one this week. So firstly, where do you see training frontline teams moving to over the next year as far as trends and topics and priorities? So how do you see that training the frontline teams? How do you see that changing, or has it changed, or is it still going to stay the same? How's that moved within each business?
And Tom, we'll turn to you first and then to Marcus. And first of all, whilst deployment has an online training offer for us, We didn't script this question.
No, it has come into the audience.
I could see Josh Strutt typing away in the
I
background.
know.
Absolutely.
I was looking at the name to see.
Very good, very good. Yeah, no, look, I think yeah, definitely an area of focus. So I think Brian, you touched on the community. So we've got a few key communities there. We're really looking to double down our efforts in terms of how we engage with those, really what we would nominate as those sort of hero categories, I guess you'd call them. It's a challenging environment in our physical store network where you've got just so much breadth of offer there. So I think, we think about how that plays out in some of those key ranges, and then the more generalist piece as well. So I think that's probably how we're treating the physical environment. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of product training, a lot of what the customer is expecting from us in terms of how that plays out. Equally, how that translates to online is really important as well. So, when you've got that people that are doing the online, particularly on the research side of things, which we, as we all know, a number of people do, having that team available to them to be able to be responsive, to be able to give them the information that they're looking for, rather than just have to read through an F&B section on a website, is something that we're definitely getting under the hood of, and making sure that we continue to accelerate and develop in that space as well. So hugely important. Can't underestimate the investment of what we're doing with our retail frontline team.
Yeah, it's a great answer. And I will say, when we build a lot of the online stuff through deployment, we do zero in on that product knowledge piece at the base level. It's such a difference to the confidence of people. And also the staff's ability to embrace the endless aisle type thinking. If we haven't got it in shop, we'll get it online and so forth. And they're really obvious, but often barriers at that on-the-ground experience. And Marcus, your sort of commentary on that question, if I may?
I think the short term for us, particularly with our retail team members, it's been such a disruptive period, and particularly for New South Wales and Victorian staff that have been stood down and out of stores for so long now. It's really focused on re-energizing with the team and obviously getting them back in a safe way in which they feel comfortable in the environment and dealing with customers in I guess in this sort of term still COVID impacted world. So that's really our short term focus.
Yeah, fantastic. Anastasia.
Fantastic. So we've got a couple of other questions. One is, how do you see the returns process changing? This is really focused on that efficiency. How do you see that changing over the next 12 months?
Tom,
was that returns process?
Returns process, sorry, yes. How do you see the returns process?
Yeah, look, I think we're just going to make it as easy as possible. I think in store, that's something that hasn't probably been as challenging as for a traditional bricks shopper. I think that's probably not looking to evolve that significantly differently from how that's played out recently. Online's the opportunity. So I think we've played around with Parcel Point and returns and Australia Post and a few others, and obviously the pressures that they're under is probably not making that the ideal experience in its current shape. So yeah, we're exploring lots of different options there in terms of how we can make that more seamless for the customer at the moment. Expect that'll continue to evolve quite a lot in the next short to medium term.
There was an interesting concept coming out of Europe that post offices were changing, and the post offices had fitting rooms. So you could, collect your parcel, open it, try on the product immediately, package it straight back up and send it straight back again. And I thought that was quite an interesting concept, from an ease of customer experience. I don't have to wait for the parcel, take it home, do it all, send it back. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Good example.
Another question here, the US online sales peaked towards the end of 2020 and then seem to see a bit of a fallback. Do we think that's going to happen in Australia? Where do we see it moving?
Can I have a quick crack at that? Absolutely. I see a very similar trend, but we'll pass to our guests. Tom? Sorry, Marcus, go ahead.
I think I touched on this point earlier, that I think retail has once physical stores will be opened, I think there'll be a leveling out of that online growth. I think again consumers will be back enjoying that in-store experience, which will help balance out some of the growth that we've seen and some of the pressure that we've seen on particularly on online channels and logistics from that standpoint.
Yeah, I agree.
Totally aligned to that. I don't think there's any wildly different opinions here, and I think with early signs that there's clearly that bricks shopper that's keen to get back into that physical environment, physical experience. I think it's interesting though, as this has played out, just how we invest in online and fulfillment and what that sort of, again, short, medium, long term. So we're trying to, rather than just look at it in the sort of short term, actually have a good look down the future. And it is a bit of a crystal ball opportunity, but I think we've got to try and best set ourselves up for that forecast volumes of what we do expect to see come through, and what's the optimal network in terms of how we go about most efficiently fulfilling that demand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just in the essence of time, because we have overrun slightly, I've got one final question. So this is, are you using TikTok for your businesses? I'm very keen to hear about this.
And we didn't script that question at all.
Well, look, today, no, we have discussed it though. I will say that we have discussed it. So, look, I think what's fascinating, that's a great question. I love it. The shape of our marketing department, marketing/e-commerce, I think, if we look back 12, 18, 24 months, we've significantly reshaped that part of the support function due to how we think we need to face into that demand as well. So I think we've got some really very focused resource in there now to start to really explore some of these channels. I think the best way I can reference that is it's probably been around executing what we do currently to an improved, enhanced standard, and then thinking about what else, where does that evolve to. So hopefully coming to a space near you, Rebel TikTok, look out. Okay, great question. Thank you.
Good. Marcus, we see TikTok as part of the social media agenda of Munro?
Look, it hasn't been on my radar as yet. I'd be surprised if it's in the short term, just based on our core customer demographic. But who knows what the current research will unearth.
Yeah, good.
I think it's all about that core customer and who are we speaking to, because even in the younger age bracket, you've got to have the right personality for TikTok. And a couple of the research pieces I have seen that like 20% are interacting with brands in that Gen Z, really the extroverted Gen Z, and they want to interact on TikTok. But you've really got to have that target customer. It's definitely not one for everybody, but it's going to be interesting to see how it moves in the next sort of 6 to 12 months. I could say, I think one maybe more for Marcus is that I've seen a lot of trying on shoes using augmented reality on like Snapchat and Instagram. I think that's probably one I can imagine you moving into.
Yeah, look, absolutely. It's in terms of options to get right sizing. We're looking at virtual selling channels as well. So I think that's probably more in line with the things that the opportunities for us as a business to really leverage technology again.
Yes, fantastic. All right, I think that's all we've got time for today. So just to wrap up, firstly, obviously, a big thank you to our speakers, to Tom and Marcus. It's been absolutely fantastic. It's been a great discussion. We probably have chatted a bit longer than we should have done. Also, just for our audience as well, nominations are now open for Australian Retail Innovators. So you can use the QR code on screen, or you can go to the Retail.group website, and there'll be a link from our page there to nominate. The nominations are now open until the 30th of November. So make sure you get in, nominate your business or nominate another business that you think is really doing well in the space. We've got 7 different categories there. So I'm sure there is a category for each business. And all of the finalists from Australian Retail Innovators get put forward to our Global Retail Innovators each year. So we put them forward as nominations, and then the top retailers from around the world get selected to be the global finalists. And for those of you that were with us at our last webinar, you'll have heard there was three final selections for Australia for 2021, which was Flora and Fauna, Litmus Labs, and Vinnie's Victoria. So there was some really good nominations, and this was from hundreds and hundreds of submissions from around the world. So do not hesitate, nominate now. And finally, in my media upcoming events, we've got 2 more events planned to round out this year. So the next one is going to be on the 4th of November, and this one we're talking about digital, so how to make the cloud work for you. And then finally, our last event of the year is the 17th of November, and that one's going to have very much a customer experience focus. So we've got some fantastic speakers to finish up the year, and then also hopefully planning next year's schedule. So please keep your eyes peeled for that, where we will be coming back with some face-to-face meetings. So it'll be great to see everyone in person again soon as well. Fantastic.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. And again, thanks to Tom and to Marcus. Terrific discussion. Really appreciate the way you both approached it. And looking forward to seeing both Rebel and Munro Footwear nominations for the Australian Retail Innovator Awards, and talking to you soon. So thanks very much. Anastasia, thank you very much for putting it together, the team at Retail Doctor Group, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.